My name is Alexandra Mitchell, but everyone calls me Alex. At 38, I became one of the few female four-star generals in American military history. Today, I stood outside my brother James's promotion ceremony in my full dress uniform, complete with every medal I earned through blood and sacrifice. The irony wasn't lost on me, being the highest-ranking officer in my family, yet somehow not on the guest list. 20 years of service, 4 stars, and 2 combat tours. Yet I couldn't get past the registration table. Before I continue this story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that like button. And subscribe to follow more stories about standing your ground when others try to erase you. Growing up in a military household in Virginia shaped both James and me from our earliest days. Our father, Colonel William Mitchell, ran our home with the precision and discipline of the units he commanded. Every morning began with inspection, beds made with hospital corners, shoes polished to mirror shine, and rooms organized with military efficiency. While some might consider this upbringing harsh, it instilled in us values that would serve us throughout our lives. Discipline, attention to detail, and unwavering commitment. James and I were only 3 years apart, close enough to be companions rather than distant siblings. We climbed trees together in our backyard, built elaborate forts in the woods behind our housing complex, and defended each other from neighborhood bullies. Our favorite game was Soldiers, where we'd create elaborate missions to rescue stuffed animals from imaginary enemy territory. Even then, I displayed tactical thinking that impressed our father, creating diversion tactics and multiple approach routes while James executed the plans with precision. "You two will make fine officers someday," our father would say with rare approval. Those words planted seeds that would grow into our shared dream of military service. When I turned 18, I joined the military immediately after high school graduation. James, still 15 at the time, watched with a mixture of pride and envy as I headed off to basic training. I still remember his face at the bus station, a complicated blend of admiration and the first subtle hint of competitive spirit that would later define our relationship. My rise through the ranks surprised everyone, including myself. What began as a way to pay for college became my calling. I discovered I had natural leadership abilities and strategic thinking that set me apart. My commanding officers noticed too, recommending me for advanced training and accelerated promotion tracks. By 25, I had already achieved the rank of captain and completed my first deployment. 3 years after I joined, James followed suit, choosing the Army while I had selected the Air Force. Initially, we supported each other fully, exchanging letters during deployments and calling whenever possible. We shared advice, celebrated each other's achievements, and provided emotional support during difficult moments that only fellow service members could understand. The first signs of strain appeared after my promotion to major at 30. James remained a captain, his career progression steady but not exceptional. During my leave that year, I visited him at Fort Bragg. "Congratulations, Major Mitchell," he said, raising a beer to toast me at the on-base restaurant. His smile didn't quite reach his eyes. "You'll catch up soon," I assured him, misreading his reaction as simple career anxiety rather than the beginning of resentment. "Sure," he replied, "though it seems like you've always been one step ahead." Our mother's death from cancer 5 years later temporarily bridged the growing distance between us. Standing together at her funeral, we found comfort in each other's presence. James held my hand as I delivered the eulogy, and later that night, we stayed up until dawn sharing memories of her. "She was always so proud of you, Alex," James said as sunrise painted our childhood home in golden light. "Dad showed her every article about your achievements." "She was proud of both of us," I corrected him. "She kept a scrapbook of your deployments too." James nodded but said nothing more, and I felt the moment of connection slipping away, replaced by that familiar competitive tension. By this point in my career, I had earned numerous distinctions: 2 Bronze Stars, a Purple Heart from a helicopter crash during a rescue operation in Afghanistan, and recognition for developing strategic initiatives that saved countless lives during complex operations. My expertise in cybersecurity and counterintelligence operations made me valuable beyond traditional combat roles, opening doors that historically remained closed to women. When the notification came about my promotion to Brigadier General at 34, making me one of the youngest to achieve that rank, I called James immediately. His congratulations sounded sincere, but our conversation was brief. He mentioned being busy with preparations for his own promotion to lieutenant colonel. I understood his distraction, but felt a growing distance that concerned me. My most recent promotion to 4-star general at 38 made national news. I became only the fourth woman in history to achieve this rank, breaking barriers and setting precedents that would hopefully make the path easier for those who followed. The ceremony was attended by the Joint Chiefs, the Secretary of Defense, and numerous dignitaries. James sent a congratulatory email but couldn't attend due to operational commitments, an excuse I accepted without question at the time. Looking back now, I should have recognized the pattern forming. But family relationships have a way of blinding us to what might be obvious to outsiders. I remained the optimistic big sister, convinced that our bond would overcome any professional rivalry. The email notification about James's promotion to colonel arrived while I was reviewing security protocols for an upcoming international summit. Seeing his name pulled an immediate smile to my face. My little brother had achieved an impressive milestone, and I couldn't have been prouder. I called him immediately, barely containing my excitement. "Colonel James Mitchell, congratulations." "Thanks, Alex," he replied, his voice measured but pleased. "It's been a long time coming." "I never doubted it for a second," I said truthfully. "When's the ceremony?" "I'll clear my schedule." A brief pause followed before James answered. 3 weeks from Saturday. Fort Belvoir Auditorium. "I'll be there with bells on," I promised, already mentally rearranging meetings and commitments. "You don't have to go to all that trouble," he said. "I know how busy you are with your responsibilities." Something in his tone gave me pause, a slight emphasis on responsibilities that felt dismissive rather than respectful. But I brushed it aside, attributing it to the poor connection or perhaps pre-promotion stress. "Nothing would keep me away," I assured him. "This is important, James. I'm so proud of you." After hanging up, I immediately contacted my assistant to clear my schedule for that weekend. Being a 4-star general meant my calendar was typically planned months in advance. But family came first. I moved 3 briefings, rescheduled a meeting with an international delegation, and assigned my deputy to represent me at a security conference. No small feats, but absolutely worth it to support James on his big day. The weeks before the ceremony were filled with careful preparation. I had my dress uniform meticulously pressed and inspected, ensuring every detail was perfect. My aide, Lieutenant Samantha Rogers, helped me polish my medals and insignia until they gleamed. "You're going to outshine the new colonel," she joked as she arranged my decorations in their precise order. "That's not the goal," I replied with a smile. "This day is all about my brother." As I prepared, memories of previous ceremonies flooded back. I remembered James attending my promotion to captain, bringing me a small silver compass engraved with our family motto, "True North never wavers." I still kept it on my desk as a reminder of our shared values and heritage. When he made major, I gave him a vintage fountain pen that had belonged to our grandfather, also a military man. These traditions mattered to us, symbols of our family's legacy of service. 2 weeks before the ceremony, I visited a specialized military memorabilia shop in Arlington to find the perfect gift. After an hour of consideration, I selected a handcrafted shadow box for his medals with a custom engraving, "Colonel James Mitchell, continuing the legacy of honor." It felt right, acknowledging both his achievement and our shared history. The evening before my planned departure, my father called. At 72, he remained sharp and perceptive, his military bearing evident even through the phone. "Alexandra," he said, using my full name as always. "I understand you're attending James's ceremony tomorrow." "Of course," I replied, finalizing my packing. "I wouldn't miss it." A weighted silence followed before he continued. I'm concerned about the dynamics between you two. James has changed since your last promotion. There's a bitterness there I don't fully understand. Dad, we're adults now, I assured him. Whatever competitive feelings existed when we were younger are long gone. This is a celebration. I hope you're right, he said, his tone suggesting he believed otherwise. Just prepare yourself for anything. I dismissed his concerns, convinced that our sibling bond would transcend any professional jealousy. After all, we'd both achieved impressive careers. There was enough success for both Mitchell children. That night, I sat on my balcony overlooking the Potomac, reflecting on our journey. From those children playing soldier in the backyard to actual military officers serving our country, we'd both fulfilled the destiny our father had envisioned for us. Tomorrow would be a reunion and celebration, a chance to reconnect beyond the obligations and responsibilities that had kept us apart. I fell asleep with optimism. My uniform hanging ready for morning, the wrapped gift box on my dresser, and my heart full of anticipation for a meaningful family moment. The complexity awaiting me remained completely unseen as I drifted off, confident in the power of family ties to overcome any obstacle. Morning arrived with perfect spring weather. I dressed with the precision drilled into me through decades of service, each button and medal positioned exactly according to regulation. The 4 stars on my shoulder boards caught the light as I gave myself a final inspection in the mirror. Ready for duty. This time, the duty of being a supportive sister. The drive to Fort Belvoir took just under an hour from my Arlington apartment. Spring had painted the Virginia landscape in vibrant greens and flowering trees, creating a backdrop that matched my optimistic mood. I parked in the visitors section, noting the increased security and decorative bunting that signaled a special event. Several officers already heading toward the auditorium noticed me exiting my car and rendered appropriate salutes, which I returned with practiced precision. General Mitchell, good morning, ma'am. A young lieutenant said as our paths crossed near the entrance. It's an honor to see you here today. Thank you, Lieutenant. Are you participating in the ceremony? I asked. Yes, ma'am. I serve under Colonel Mitchell in tactical operations. He's an excellent commander. I smiled with genuine pride. I'm glad to hear it. He always had a talent for leading from the front. The auditorium entrance was decorated with flags and military insignia, creating an appropriately ceremonial atmosphere. Several photographers were setting up equipment, and a small string quartet practiced in one corner. Family members in their Sunday best mingled with officers in full dress uniforms, creating that unique military ceremony atmosphere that blended formality with familial pride. I approached the registration table with confidence, nodding at several officers who recognized me along the way. 2 junior officers manned the check-in station, surrounded by stacks of programs and name badges. Good morning, I greeted them. General Alexandra Mitchell checking in. The young officers immediately straightened to attention, clearly surprised by my presence. The female lieutenant recovered first, quickly checking her tablet. General Mitchell, she began, her finger scrolling through the digital list. Her expression shifted from confidence to confusion. I'm sorry, ma'am, but I'm not seeing your name on our guest list. That must be a mistake, I replied calmly. I'm Colonel Mitchell's sister. Please check again. The lieutenant exchanged an uncomfortable glance with her colleague before returning to her tablet. I've checked the family section, the VIP section, and the military guest section, ma'am. Your name doesn't appear on any of them. A cold sensation began forming in my stomach, but I maintained my professional demeanor. Perhaps there was an administrative oversight. Could you check with the event coordinator? Of course, General. The lieutenant stepped away to make a call while I waited, increasingly aware of the curious glances from others in the entrance area. Through the open doors of the auditorium, I caught sight of James in his dress uniform, speaking animatedly with a group of senior officers. For a moment, our eyes met across the distance. Rather than the surprise or concern I expected, he quickly averted his gaze and turned his back, continuing his conversation as if he hadn't seen me. That moment crystallized what my mind had been reluctant to accept. This was no clerical error. The lieutenant returned with an older officer who introduced himself as Major Peterson, the event coordinator. His discomfort was evident as he confirmed what I already suspected. "I've checked all records, General Mitchell. Your name was not included on any of the guest lists submitted by Colonel Mitchell or his staff. I'm deeply sorry for the confusion." "I see," I replied, my voice steady despite the hollow feeling expanding inside me. "Thank you for checking, Major." As I stood there processing this information, a memory surfaced from our childhood. I was 12 and the neighborhood kids had organized a baseball game. James, at 9, had been put in charge of team selection that day. When I arrived at the field, ready to play, he pretended not to see me, choosing everyone else until no spots remained. When I confronted him later, he shrugged and said, "You always get picked for everything." I wanted to be in charge this time. Now, 30 years later, the pattern repeated itself in a far more public and painful way. Several security officers had noticed the commotion and approached cautiously, creating an even more awkward situation. I could read their discomfort clearly. No one wanted to be the person who turned away a 4-star general, yet they had protocols to follow. "General Mitchell," one of them began carefully, "would you like us to contact Colonel Mitchell directly?" I glanced again toward the auditorium where James continued mingling, still pointedly avoiding looking in my direction. Making a scene would embarrass us both and overshadow what should be a special day, regardless of his actions toward me. The professional soldier in me recognized when a tactical retreat was the better option. "That won't be necessary," I replied with dignity. "Please carry on with the ceremony as planned." I stepped aside, allowing other guests to approach the registration table while I walked toward a quiet alcove to collect my thoughts. The gift box felt suddenly heavy in my hands, a symbol of a relationship I had clearly misunderstood. Finding a bench in a garden area outside the building, I sat down and pulled out my phone. After a moment's hesitation, I called Eleanor Reynolds, my fellow general and closest friend since our academy days. "Elle, it's Alex," I said when she answered. "You won't believe what just happened." As I recounted the situation, her initial shock gave way to calculated anger. "This isn't just about sibling rivalry, Alex. This is an intentional slight to a superior officer. It has professional implications beyond your family dynamics." "I know," I replied, watching more guests arrive for the ceremony that was scheduled to begin in 20 minutes. "The question is, what do I do now? What would you tell a junior officer who came to you with this situation?" Eleanor challenged. The answer formed in my mind immediately. I would tell them that respect is earned through actions, that dignity doesn't mean accepting disrespect, and that sometimes leadership requires making difficult stands. "I need to think about this carefully," I told Eleanor. "But I'm not simply walking away." "Good," she replied firmly. "Because that's not the Alexandra Mitchell I know." As I ended the call, my resolve began to crystallize. This wasn't just about a family slight anymore. This was about principles that define my entire career and life. The walk to my car felt longer than it should have. Each step weighted with emotions I rarely allowed myself to feel. Military training teaches you to compartmentalize, to process emotions later when the mission is complete. But what was my mission now? As I reached my vehicle, memories cascaded through my mind, moments when I'd put family first despite career consequences. The time I'd flown 17 hours straight from a classified location in Asia to attend James's graduation from Special Forces training. The recommendation letter I'd written that helped him secure his first command position, leveraging my reputation despite warnings about nepotism concerns. The countless times I'd defended him in conversations with senior officers who questioned whether he'd earned his achievements on merit or through family connections. I sat in my car without starting the engine, staring at the Fort Belvoir auditorium in the distance. The American flag fluttered above it, a reminder of what this was really about, not just family, but values, integrity, honor, respect. My phone rang, displaying my father's number. I answered, steeling myself. Alexandra, he said, his voice tight with controlled anger. I'm in the auditorium. Where are you? Apparently, I wasn't invited, I replied, maintaining a calm I didn't feel. My name wasn't on any guest list. A long silence followed, then a heavy sigh. I was afraid of something like this. James has been different lately. He's fallen in with a particular group of officers, old guard types who aren't pleased with some of your modernization initiatives. This revelation added another dimension to the situation. My recent work had focused on structural reforms within the military, particularly expanding opportunities for women and minorities in combat and leadership roles. These changes had met resistance from traditionalists who viewed them as politically motivated rather than merit-based improvements. Are you saying this is both personal and political? I asked, connecting dots I hadn't previously considered. I believe so, my father confirmed. General Harrington is here, seated in the front row. He's been quite vocal about opposing your integrated combat unit proposal. General Walter Harrington, a 3-star known for his behind-the-scenes political maneuvering and stubborn resistance to change. Suddenly, James's actions took on a more calculated aspect. I see, I said, anger and hurt crystallizing into something more focused. Thank you for letting me know. What will you do? He asked, knowing me well enough to recognize the shift in my tone. I'm still deciding, I answered truthfully. But I won't simply disappear. After ending the call, I sat quietly for 5 full minutes, weighing options and consequences with the strategic analysis that had earned me my stars. This moment demanded a response, but it needed to be measured, purposeful, and appropriate to both my rank and the situation. I started the car and drove a short distance to a coffee shop off base. Once seated in a quiet corner, I made several calls in quick succession. First, to my aide, Lieutenant Rogers. Sam, I need you to bring my ceremonial uniform to Fort Belvoir immediately. Yes, the full regalia. And my citation portfolio. The ceremonial uniform included every medal, ribbon, and distinction I'd earned throughout my career, significantly more impressive than the standard dress blues I currently wore. Next, I called General Marcus Williams, the presiding officer at today's ceremony according to the program I'd glimpsed. We had served together during Operation Enduring Freedom and maintained a mutual respect. Marcus, it's Alex Mitchell. I understand you're presiding over Colonel Mitchell's promotion today. I explained the situation concisely. His response was measured but supportive. That's highly irregular, Alex. And inappropriate given your rank and relationship. What can I do? Nothing directly, I assured him. I'll handle this myself. I just wanted you to be aware of the situation. My final call was to the base commander, an old academy classmate who expressed appropriate shock at the situation. While he couldn't officially intervene in the ceremony, he ensured I would have appropriate access to the base for my return. Lieutenant Rogers arrived in record time with my ceremonial uniform. I changed in the coffee shop restroom, emerging transformed. The full ceremonial uniform of a 4-star general is designed to command attention and respect. Each medal, ribbon, and badge represented specific achievements, combat experiences, and recognized excellence. The 4 silver stars on each shoulder gleamed under the lights, unmistakable symbols of authority earned through decades of exemplary service. As I adjusted the final details, I caught my reflection in the window. This wasn't about vanity or showing off. Each element of this uniform told a story of service, sacrifice, and commitment to values larger than myself. The stars represented not just my rank, but the trust placed in me by the military and the nation, trust earned through consistently demonstrating integrity, courage, intelligence, and leadership. I drove back to Fort Belvoir with clear purpose, no longer wounded, but resolved. This would not be about creating a scene or embarrassing James. This would be about standing for principles, the very principles our father had taught us both, the principles that formed the foundation of military service itself. The ceremony would be well underway by now. My timing needed to be precise, assertive without being disruptive, making a point without undermining the ceremonial importance of the event. As I approached the base gate, I mentally prepared for what would come next. This wasn't just about a sister excluded from a brother's celebration anymore. This was about accountability, respect, and the standards we uphold, especially when it's difficult. Sometimes leadership means having uncomfortable conversations. Sometimes it means showing up when others would prefer you didn't. And sometimes it means wearing your stars not as a threat, but as a reminder of what they truly represent. My return to Fort Belvoir created an immediate ripple effect. The security guards at the gate snapped to attention when they recognized my vehicle, their expressions shifting from routine vigilance to alert respect when they saw the 4 stars on my epaulets. I provided my identification and explained my purpose calmly. "General Mitchell," the senior guard said, saluting crisply. "We've been notified of your arrival. Please proceed to the officer's entrance at the west side of the auditorium." The base commander had clearly made arrangements, ensuring no repeat of the earlier rejection. I nodded my acknowledgement and drove through, navigating toward the designated area where a young corporal waited to direct me to a reserved parking space. As I stepped from my vehicle, the full impact of my ceremonial uniform became evident. Unlike the standard dress blues I'd worn earlier, this uniform displayed the complete array of my service history. 2 rows of medals crossed my chest, including the Distinguished Service Medal, Silver Star, Legion of Merit, and Purple Heart. Campaign ribbons from Afghanistan, Iraq, and other operations created a colorful tapestry of service. The 4 silver stars on each shoulder caught the sunlight, unmistakable symbols of my rank and authority. Each step toward the auditorium felt measured and purposeful. Several junior officers outside the building rendered salutes, their eyes widening at the unexpected presence of a 4-star general. I returned each salute precisely, maintaining the dignified bearing that 2 decades of service had ingrained in me. Through my military contacts, I'd learned the ceremony schedule. The formal promotion would be followed by a speech from James, then congratulatory remarks from senior officers. I timed my entrance for the transition period between the official promotion and the speeches, a moment that would make my presence known without disrupting the ceremonial aspects. The corporal escorted me to a side entrance where a major waited, clearly having been informed of my arrival. He saluted and opened the door without question, allowing me to slip into the back of the auditorium as applause signaled the completion of the formal promotion portion of the ceremony. The room was filled to capacity, with approximately 300 attendees seated in neat rows facing the stage. James stood at the podium, newly adorned with his colonel's eagles, beginning his acceptance speech. General Williams sat to one side with several other senior officers, while my father occupied a front row seat among the family section. My entrance did not go unnoticed. Like a wave, awareness of my presence spread through the room. Heads turned, whispers erupted, and a palpable shift in energy rippled from the back rows forward. James faltered mid-sentence as the disturbance reached the stage, his eyes finding mine across the distance. I maintained perfect composure, acknowledging the attention with a slight nod, but making no move to disrupt the proceedings. Instead, I proceeded down the center aisle with measured steps, my aide following 2 paces behind. When a junior officer hurriedly vacated a front row seat, I took it graciously, sitting directly in James's line of sight. For several seconds, James seemed unable to continue, the significance of my appearance clearly registering in his expression. To his credit, he recovered quickly and resumed his speech, though his delivery became notably more rigid. As I assumed this new responsibility, he continued, voice slightly tighter than before. I recognize the importance of honoring the traditions and structures that have made our military the greatest fighting force in the world. The subtext wasn't lost on me, a subtle dig at the modernization initiatives I championed. But I maintained my composed expression, listening respectfully as he finished his remarks. When James concluded, General Williams approached the podium for the closing comments. He paused, surveying the audience before speaking. Before we continue, I believe we have the honor of an unexpected guest among us. His eyes met mine with subtle approval. General Alexandra Mitchell, would you care to say a few words? The invitation wasn't part of the program, but it was the appropriate protocol when a four-star general attended such an event. It also elegantly addressed the awkwardness of my earlier exclusion without explicitly mentioning it. James's face tightened as I rose and approached the stage. We passed each other at the steps. A brief moment of proximity where I offered a small, professional nod which he returned stiffly. Standing at the podium, I surveyed the room filled with officers of various ranks, family members, and officials. My voice, when I spoke, carried the confidence and clarity that had served me throughout my career. Thank you, General Williams. It is my privilege to witness this significant moment in Colonel Mitchell's career. I turned slightly toward James. Family has always been the foundation of service for the Mitchell household. Our father, Colonel William Mitchell, retired, instilled in us the values that guide us today: integrity, excellence, and unwavering commitment to duty. I paused, allowing my gaze to briefly meet General Harrington's in the front row before continuing. The strength of our military lies not just in our traditions, but in our ability to evolve while honoring those traditions. True leadership requires both respect for our foundation and vision for our future. I turned back to James. Colonel Mitchell has demonstrated the skills and dedication worthy of his new rank. I have no doubt he will serve with the distinction expected of an officer of the United States military. My message was carefully calibrated, congratulating James while subtly addressing the larger principles at stake. I concluded with, on behalf of the Joint Chiefs, I extend congratulations to Colonel James Mitchell. May your service continue to honor the uniform we all wear with pride. The applause that followed seemed particularly enthusiastic, perhaps fueled by the dramatic tension underlying the moment. As I descended from the stage, General Williams resumed the podium to formally conclude the ceremony, inviting everyone to the reception in the adjacent hall. The power dynamics in the room had visibly shifted. Officers who had been seated near James earlier now made their way toward me, offering respectful greetings. My father approached, a mixture of pride and concern in his expression. That was well handled, Alexandra, he said quietly. Dignified, but unmistakable. Thank you, I replied, scanning the room for James, who appeared to be surrounded by a protective circle of his allies. Some conversations still need to happen. General Harrington passed nearby, nodding curtly in my direction, but making no attempt to engage directly, a telling reaction from someone who rarely missed an opportunity to cultivate political connections. As the crowd moved toward the reception, I could see that my presence had created ripples that extended far beyond family dynamics. Junior officers watched the interactions carefully, undoubtedly noting who aligned where in this unexpected display of military politics. This, too, was part of their education, learning that rank came with responsibilities beyond battlefield command, including the courage to stand for principles even in uncomfortable situations. I moved toward the reception hall, prepared for the next phase of this unexpected confrontation, aware that the most challenging conversation still lay ahead. The reception hall buzzed with conversation and movement. Military precision temporarily relaxed in the social atmosphere following the ceremony. Crystal glasses clinked, professional photographers circulated capturing formal groups, and the string quartet provided elegant background music. Despite the practiced civility, an undercurrent of tension remained palpable. I found myself becoming an unexpected center of gravity in the room. Officers of various ranks approached to pay respects, many using the opportunity to briefly discuss initiatives or upcoming postings. Each conversation reinforced what my appearance had accomplished, reminding everyone present of the chain of command and proper military protocol that had been momentarily forgotten in James's planning. General Mitchell, your cybersecurity framework has revolutionized our approach in European operations, a lieutenant colonel told me, clearly eager to establish a connection. Thank you, Colonel. I'm pleased it's proving effective in the field, I replied, maintaining the professional, approachable demeanor that had served me well with subordinates. From across the room, I observed James carefully. He moved between groups, accepting congratulations and engaging in conversation, but his body language revealed his awareness of my presence. He strategically positioned himself to avoid direct contact, maintaining maximum distance between us as he circulated. Our father approached, champagne glass in hand, his expression suggesting he'd had enough of the situation. "This has gone on long enough," he said quietly. "You two need to speak privately before this becomes fodder for base gossip for months to come." "I agree," I replied, but James seems determined to avoid that conversation. My father nodded toward a side door. "There's a small conference room down that hallway. I'll direct him there in 5 minutes. This needs resolution, Alexandra." I made my way discreetly to the indicated room, a modest space with a small table and several chairs, likely used for pre-ceremony briefings. The quiet felt welcome after the crowded reception. I removed my service cap and placed it on the table, then stood by the window, gathering my thoughts. True to his word, my father delivered James to the room minutes later, closing the door firmly behind my brother's reluctant entrance. For a moment, we simply regarded each other in silence. Two Mitchell siblings in full military dress, stars and eagles glinting under the fluorescent lights. "Congratulations on your promotion, James." "It's well-deserved," I began, offering an opening that acknowledged his achievement. "Is it?" he replied, remaining near the door. "Or did I get it because I'm General Mitchell's brother?" The bitterness in his voice surprised me with its intensity. "Your record speaks for itself, James. I've never interfered with your career progression." "You didn't have to," he shot back. "Every assignment, every posting, I've heard the whispers. That's Alexandra Mitchell's brother. Never just James Mitchell, officer on his own merits." "And that justified excluding me from your ceremony? Having me turned away at the door?" I kept my voice even, though the hurt resurfaced as I said the words aloud. James paced several steps, military posture momentarily abandoned. "You don't understand what it's like living in your shadow. 4-star General Alexandra Mitchell, breaking barriers, making history. How do I compete with that?" "This isn't a competition," I replied. "It never was. We're both serving our country according to our abilities." "Easy for you to say from the top," he countered. "Do you know what General Harrington told me? That your reforms are destroying the meritocracy of the military, that your elevation was politically motivated rather than earned." The pieces fell into place more clearly. "And you believed him?" "I don't know what to believe anymore," James admitted, frustration evident in his voice. "But for once, I wanted a day that wasn't overshadowed by your rank and reputation." "Is that so wrong?" I considered my response carefully. This wasn't just about hurt feelings anymore. It cut to the core of military values and personal integrity. "Let me ask you something, James. If any other 4-star general had been turned away from your ceremony, not your sister, just any general, would that be appropriate military protocol?" He didn't answer immediately, recognizing the trap in the question. "This isn't just about family dynamics," I continued. "When you allowed Harrington and his faction to influence you into breaching military protocol, you compromised the very principles of the organization you serve. Merit isn't just about tactical skills or battlefield courage. It's about integrity in all circumstances." "That's rich coming from someone who's benefited from the Pentagon's diversity initiatives," he retorted, though his voice held less conviction. "Do you honestly believe I didn't earn these?" I asked quietly, touching the stars on my shoulder. 23 years of service. 2 combat tours. 3 years of 70-hour weeks modernizing our cybersecurity infrastructure. A helicopter crash that left me with a titanium rod in my leg. I stepped closer. "I've never asked for special treatment, James. I've only asked for equal opportunity to serve based on capability." Something in my words seemed to penetrate his defenses. His posture shifted subtly, less combative than before. "I didn't personally remove you from the guest list," he admitted finally. Harrington's aide suggested it would be better to keep the ceremony focused on traditional military values without the distraction of recent controversies. "And you allowed it," I said. Not as an accusation, but as a simple fact. Before he could respond, a knock at the door interrupted us. A young lieutenant appeared, looking apologetic. "Excuse me, General, Colonel. General Williams is asking for both of you to join the official photographs." "We'll be right there, Lieutenant," I responded, waiting until the door closed again before turning back to James. "This conversation isn't finished, but we have duties to attend to now." James nodded, military bearing returning as he prepared to rejoin the public event. At the door, he paused. "I should have stood up to them," he said quietly. "Whatever our personal issues, you deserved better treatment as both a superior officer and my sister." It wasn't a full apology, but it was a start, an acknowledgement that principles had been compromised. We returned to the reception separately, maintaining professional composure as we rejoined the celebration. Throughout the remainder of the event, I noticed subtle shifts in the room's dynamics. Officers who had been clustering around General Harrington earlier now made efforts to engage with me as well, perhaps hedging their bets or recognizing the political winds might not blow in the direction they'd anticipated. James, too, seemed to maintain a more independent position, less obviously aligned with Harrington's circle. As the reception concluded, I exchanged brief, professional goodbyes with James and our father before departing. The drive home provided much-needed solitude to process the day's events. What had begun as a painful personal slight had evolved into something more complex, a microcosm of the larger challenges facing military culture as it evolved in the modern era. My phone rang just as I arrived home. It was General Williams. "Alexandra, I wanted to check in after today's unusual circumstances." "I appreciate the call, Marcus. Your handling of the situation was exemplary," he said. "Dignified and appropriate. It didn't go unnoticed in the right circles." "Thank you, but this was never about making a point." "Perhaps not intentionally," he replied, "but sometimes the most effective leadership statements are those we make by simply standing our ground with integrity." Several junior officers approached me afterward, quite impressed by your composure under difficult circumstances. After ending the call, I removed my ceremonial uniform carefully, returning each medal and insignia to its place in my display case. The 4 stars caught the light one final time before I closed the lid. Today had been about more than family dynamics or military politics. It had been about living the values I'd sworn to uphold, especially when, it was personally difficult to do so. 1 week later, I sat in my Pentagon office reviewing security briefings when my assistant announced the arrival of a courier with a personal delivery. The sealed envelope bore James's distinctive handwriting, triggering a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. Inside was a handwritten letter, an increasingly rare form of communication in our digital age, and all the more meaningful for its deliberate formality. "Alexandra," it began. "Words cannot adequately express my regret for the events surrounding my promotion ceremony. My actions, and those I permitted through inaction, were unbecoming of an officer and unworthy of a brother. While I cannot undo the disrespect shown, I can acknowledge it was wrong and assure you it will never happen again. If you're willing, I would appreciate the opportunity to speak in person when your schedule permits." The letter continued with reflections on our shared upbringing and divergent career paths, concluding with a simple signature, "With respect and admiration, James." I placed the letter in my desk drawer, neither immediately accepting nor rejecting its olive branch. Time and actions would need to demonstrate the sincerity behind the words. Sunday dinner at our father's home 3 days later provided the first test. James arrived shortly after I did. The initial moments filled with awkward formality before our father broke the tension in his characteristically direct manner. "If you two are planning to maintain this stalemate through dinner, I should have ordered pizza instead of cooking pot roast," he remarked, placing the carving knife deliberately on the table between us. James smiled slightly at the metaphor. "I think we can manage civil conversation, Dad." Throughout dinner, we navigated careful conversation about neutral topics, recent base reassignments, our father's volunteer work with veterans, mutual acquaintances from the academy. Only after dessert, when our father strategically excused himself to make coffee, did James address the elephant in the room. I've been doing a lot of thinking since the ceremony, he said, studying his water glass. About competitiveness and resentment and how they can blind us to our own compromises. It's a common human failing, I replied, neither accusatory nor dismissive. The military just adds rank structure to complicate it further. I spoke with General Williams yesterday. James continued. Requested a transfer to Fort Lewis. I think some distance from certain influences would be beneficial for my command perspective. The decision surprised me. Fort Lewis would remove him from Harrington's sphere of influence, a clear professional choice with personal implications. That sounds like a positive step. I acknowledged. Command decisions reflect our individual values, not group pressures. When our father returned, the atmosphere had shifted slightly, less brittle than before. It wasn't reconciliation yet, but it was movement in that direction. A recognition that healing would require deliberate choices and time. 2 weeks later, I accepted James's invitation to meet at a small cafe halfway between our respective posts. The neutral territory provided space for more direct conversation than our father's dining room had allowed. I've been thinking about something you said at the ceremony, James began after initial pleasantries. About the military's strength lying in both respecting tradition and embracing necessary change. It's a difficult balance, I acknowledged. The thing is, he continued, I've focused so much on feeling overshadowed that I never considered what it cost you to create that shadow in the first place. His fingers traced patterns on the tablecloth. The barriers you faced, the scrutiny, the constant need to prove yourself beyond what was required of your male counterparts. It wasn't easy, I admitted. Still isn't sometimes. Dad told me about the death threats you received after implementing the Integrated Combat Teams initiative. You never mentioned them. I shrugged slightly. Complaining wouldn't have changed the necessity of the work. James nodded, understanding the philosophy that had guided my career. I allowed my personal feelings to make me a tool in someone else's resistance to progress. It won't happen again. We were raised in a competitive household, James. Dad believed it would prepare us for military life, and in many ways, it did. But it also created patterns that followed us into adulthood. Rivalry between siblings is normal, James acknowledged. Undermining a superior officer isn't. His willingness to name the professional breach directly marked a significant step forward. We spent the next hour discussing our shared childhood, the different challenges we'd each faced in our careers, and establishing clearer boundaries for our dual relationship as siblings and officers in the same chain of command. When we parted, the handshake we exchanged carried more genuine respect than formal ceremony. The road to fully rebuilt trust would be long, but its foundation was now in place. 3 months later, we both attended a retirement ceremony for General Williams. The event provided an opportunity to demonstrate our professional reconciliation publicly. When James arrived with his wife, I greeted them warmly, introducing them to colleagues without tension or awkwardness. Throughout the evening, we moved in different circles, but acknowledged each other appropriately when our paths crossed, a normal, respectful interaction between officers of different ranks who happened to share a last name. General Harrington attended as well, his influence noticeably diminished following a Pentagon reorganization that had reduced his portfolio. When he approached me with superficial congratulations on a recent successful operation, I accepted them with professional courtesy, but maintained clear boundaries. Your brother seems to have found his footing at Fort Lewis, Harrington remarked, probing for information or reaction. Colonel Mitchell has always been an excellent officer, I replied neutrally. His capabilities speak for themselves. The brief exchange demonstrated the lesson I'd internalized throughout my career. True authority doesn't require asserting dominance. It flows from consistent integrity and the respect it generates. The following week, I was scheduled to speak at the Women's Military Leadership Conference at West Point. As I prepared my remarks, I reflected on the journey that had brought me to this point, not just the recent ceremony incident, but the entire path from that little girl playing soldier in the backyard to the four-star general addressing future officers. The auditorium was filled with cadets when I took the stage, their young faces reminding me of my own early days at the academy. Among the senior officers in attendance, I noticed James seated toward the back, an unexpected but welcome presence. Leadership isn't defined by the stars on your shoulders, I told the assembled cadets, though they certainly get attention. This earned appreciative laughter. True leadership is defined by the principles that guide your decisions when those decisions are difficult. When standing up costs something. When remaining silent would be easier, but speaking out is right. Throughout the speech, I shared experiences from my career, the challenges, the breakthroughs, the lessons learned through both success and failure. I didn't mention the ceremony incident specifically, but its lessons informed my message about integrity and courage. Afterward, several female cadets approached for advice and mentoring connections. As I spoke with them, I saw in their determined expressions the future of military leadership, a future that would build on tradition while continuing to evolve. James waited until the crowd thinned before approaching. "Impressive speech," he said, though I expected nothing less. "Thank you for coming. I wasn't expecting you. Thought it was important," he replied simply. "For me. And for any officers in my command who might have questions about where I stand." His presence made a statement that words alone couldn't convey, a public alignment with the principles I'd discussed rather than the resistance faction he'd previously associated with. It represented a choice to define his own leadership path rather than allowing it to be defined by rivalry or politics. As we walked out together, a photographer from the Academy paper asked to take our picture, the Mitchell siblings, both accomplished officers in their own right, standing beside James. I felt the weight of the 4 stars on my shoulders not as a burden of expectations or a symbol of competition, but as a representation of the values we both served: integrity, excellence, courage, and commitment. The journey to this moment had been neither easy nor straight. It had required confronting painful truths, standing firm for principles, and finding the balance between accountability and grace. But the lesson it reinforced was perhaps the most important one for any leader to remember. True respect cannot be demanded through rank or position. It can only be earned through consistent demonstration of character. That evening, as I prepared notes for a mentoring session with junior female officers scheduled for the following week, I considered what wisdom would be most valuable to share. The answers came easily. Be impeccable in your integrity. Stand firm when principles are at stake. Understand that leadership is about influence rather than control. And perhaps most importantly, never let others define your worth or diminish your light. The 4 stars on my uniform represented not just authority, but responsibility to the military, to the nation, and to those who would follow the path I had helped widen. That responsibility included modeling the courage to face difficult situations with dignity and the wisdom to know when standing your ground is necessary for progress. What had started as a painful exclusion had ultimately reinforced the most important leadership lesson of all: your title may get you in the door, but your character determines what you build once you're inside. So I ask you, when have you had to stand your ground in the face of disrespect or exclusion? How did you balance assertiveness with dignity? Share your experiences in the comments below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell to join our community of resilient leaders who understand that sometimes the greatest victories come not from dominating others, but from remaining true to ourselves and our principles when it matters most. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, your worth is never determined by others' recognition, but by the integrity with which you walk your path.